The first cut is the deepest. It's true that the first time you fall in love, you would give yourself entirely to love the man you think is the one you would love for the rest of your life. Why is the first love so hard to let go and forget, even after 28 years? I was 20 years old when I fell in love for the first time in 1996. I was on a road trip with two of my friends. We decided to check out the local gay bar in Seattle on our way back to Vancouver after a long drive from San Francisco. That was the night I met Steve at the gay bar. It was truly a love at first sight moment for me when he came up to me while I was playing darts at the upstairs of the bar. Steve was tall and ruggedly handsome American Italian in his mid-30s. It was a magical and romantic moment when we chatted. We were both instantly attracted to each other. When I told my two friends that I was being cruised by Steve, they told me I should stay with him for the weekend. Later that night, Steve asked me if I had any plans. I simply told him I would love to stay and check out Seattle and spend some time with him. He was so glad that I offered that, and I ended up going home with him, instead of going back to Vancouver with my friends who were jealous but also happy for me. Steve lived in an apartment by himself in the Queen Anne area of Seattle. He worked as a U.S. Marshal. The first weekend I spent with him was so romantic and so sexual for me. He took me around to tour the city. We also went to the jazz alley to listen to live jazz music. Steve loved jazz and romantic music. He introduced me to Billie Holiday music, and he loved that Celine Dion album, The Color of My Love. We also went to his favorite Chinese restaurant for dinner. He was a true gentleman when I was with him. He was a total boyfriend material, and he was incredibly passionate in bed. I even lost my virginity to him. I learned to become a bottom, and it took a few times before I started to enjoy it. Steve was a very aggressive top in bed. I wanted to satisfy him. I wanted to feel desire, and I was falling in love with him so quickly. Over the course of the following 5 months, I took the Greyhound bus to Seattle to spend weekends with Steve. It was the happiest time of my life as a young gay man. I was in love with him deeply. He drove up to Vancouver to visit me once, and he had to stay at the Best Western Hotel because that year I had temporarily moved back to my parents' house. Steve was the only guy I had phone sex with, maybe due to the nature of our long-distance relationship. I was willing to do whatever it takes to make him happy, and I really wanted to have a relationship with him. I even thought that I would eventually move to Seattle to live with him. One day, Steve called me, and I thought he was going to tell me what time I should arrive in Seattle for him to pick me up at the Greyhound station. Instead, he told me that it's not a good idea to continue to see each other. I immediately started crying on the phone. I was so shocked and so saddened that he was breaking up with me on the phone. I asked him if he has met someone else. He said no, and it simply won't work. I told him I was willing to move to Seattle to live with him if he wanted me. I was sobbing uncontrollably. He said, "Oh, Wayne, I'm so sorry I broke your heart. Promise me you will take good care of yourself." That was the last thing I heard him say to me. So at the age of 20, I fell madly in love with Steve and also lost him after just 5 months. I was so heartbroken. It took me many months to recover from that heartbreak. I was so naive and a hopeless romantic. I reconnected with Steve 6 years later in 2002. I drove to Everett to visit him. He had moved to an hour away from Seattle, and at the time, he had been living with his new boyfriend for 5 years already in their new house. I think Steve planned it for me to visit him while his boyfriend was out of town for that weekend. The long-lost passion between us was awakened that day. We were going to have sex for the first time in 6 years, but for some strange reason, Steve wasn't able to perform like he did when he was an aggressive top that I remember. It was a blast from the past moment for me to see him again. It was also a moment for me to realize that I have lost that part of me, but I still remember the way I loved him when I was 20 years old. We never saw each other again after 2002. I learned that he had changed career from U.S. Marshal to realtor when he was in his 50s. Also, he no longer was with his boyfriend he lived with in Everett. I did a road trip again along the West Coast from Los Angeles up to Vancouver in the summer of 2013 when I was on the mend from my 5-year relationship breakup. I stopped by at the old apartment in Queen Anne where Steve used to live and I had stayed with at the time. All the beautiful memories of us in 1996 came back to me. That moment, I wondered to myself, what would happen if we didn't break up? And how my life would play out if I had moved to Seattle to live with Steve. Would we get married? Would we break up after 5 years or 10 years? I now realize that sometimes people come into my life for a season and sometimes for a reason. The way I loved Steve was unique. I never loved anyone else that way again. Today, I'm a 48-year-old gay man. Steve would be 64 years old. Sometimes I wonder what he is doing. Is he retired? Is he a happy, older gay man? Does he have someone special in his life? Will I ever see him again? Sometimes I still miss him. Sometimes I still think about him. He was my first love. The first cut was the deepest. Thank you so much for watching my video and listening to my story. I look forward to your likes, comment, and hopefully subscribe to more upcoming video. Enjoy your holiday season. Until next time, take care of yourself. Bye for now.